Hey, I'm Daniel, and you're watching an episode of my podcast, The Film Craziest Show. For this conversation, myself and my guest co-host Arpit Nayak were able to speak with Perry Blackshear, the writer, director, editor, and cinematographer for the film When I Consume You, which is a unique revenge tale about a brother and a sister who seek revenge against a mysterious stalker. You can find the film playing next at the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival on Monday, October 18th, as an in-person screening, which is cool because the film takes place in New York. Thanks so much for checking out this conversation, and here is Perry to introduce the show.
Hi, my name is Perry Blackshear. I'm the director of When I Consume You, and you're watching the Film Craziest show.
Awesome. I thought I made a typo there.
No, my like words to brain to speaking sometimes trips up. Yep.
You're gonna experience that a lot in this interview with me, so all good. No, I'm Daniel, the host of the Film Craziest show, and I'm also joined by my friend Arpit Nayak, who is from the Movie Buff, who is the first co-interviewer on this podcast. So welcome, Arpit as well.
Yeah, happy to be here.
How are you guys doing today?
Good. I've had a song in my head for about 4 weeks now, or 3 weeks, and it just still keeps playing and I can't turn it off. So other than that, it's going great.
What song?
The new Billie Eilish one where she's on a roof screaming at everything.
Oh.
It sounds like a spiritual. I actually really love the song, but it's really just it's not going away.
Okay. Okay. I can't remember the lyrics right now, so maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to start with just the fact that I was watching the credits, and I was like, okay, I expect to see writing, directing, producing, and then editing, and then cinematography as well. I might be missing any, but what's it like wearing all those hats? It's true indie fashion. What's that like?
Well, I think, I have making the credits is always kind of weird. And it makes me think of this Derek comedy skit, which is Donald Glover's NYU troupe when he was there, that is about this film student that makes all these films about how much he hates his ex, and it has these long credits over Radiohead that say like written by, directed by, art, and it just go on forever, and it's all him. And I definitely don't want it to be like that. I guess, the way we make movies is rather specific to our sort of team. And it began with they look like people out of necessity. We just didn't have any money at all. And we still don't have any money, but it's a little bit of a choice where you sacrifice a lot of things by doing it this way and having no real crew. Okay. We didn't even have a sound. The actors learned how to love themselves, and one of them was sometimes doing sound if they weren't in the scene. Sometimes I was doing sound. Cool. But you gain tons of time and a real focus on the stuff that we really care about, which is the story, the directing, and the acting, and everything else is kind of cleared away, and so you just get to focus on the stuff you love. So it's really difficult, and it's also really freeing in some ways. So I've directed slightly bigger commercials and things, and it's wonderful to have a big crew and stuff, and it's a plus and a minus, but it definitely feels like you're when it's just you and the actors, you're in your own little world, which is wonderful, and also like I said, very difficult.
Okay. Do you have a role that you have see, this is what I was talking about when my brain is catching up to my words.
Totally. I do the same thing.
Do you have a role that you're most comfortable with out of your hats?
I think it's directing. I just love working with actors. I'm really, I try to develop a lot of the script around the actors and around the characters. So I would say editing or directing, Freudian slip, directing. And then next is probably editing. I cut a lot of movies for a long time. And then I would say I also have shot a lot of films, so I enjoy the cinematographer role. It is tough sometimes directing and shooting because you really want to make sure you don't shortchange the actors by, in my second film, we actually had a hat that I would put on and take off when I was in the different roles, because you had to sort of separate the two, because you don't want to be like, oh yeah, that light looks really good, let's shoot that, because it doesn't work for the act. You want to put first things first. So I would say directing, and then editing, and then cinematography.
Okay. Taking the hats literally. I like it.
Yeah.
Arpit, you want to jump in with a couple of yours?
Sure. So, Perry, what I like to ask you first is, before we start talking about your amazing film, I like to take you back to the time, and I like to know that what inspired you to become a filmmaker.
Great question. I think, I'm almost jealous of filmmakers that said, I saw this movie and then I knew, something like this. I think it's more like someone or some place you sort of fall in love with when you're young and you just never fall out of love with it, and I think, I don't know, I watched a bunch of Disney movies when I was young. I know this sounds ridiculous for someone that works in sort of dark genre stuff, but it's always been there, rather than a sort of transitional period that I think some people have. And I started making little movies when I was in middle school with my friends, and we had lightsabers and running around, and I think, and looking back, I'm trying to sort of pinpoint what I loved so much about it. I don't know, was it like making new worlds? I have one theory, which is most of indie filmmaking is just people liking hanging out with other people, and they just happen to like want to make movies together, because it's kind of like being in a band and you're just like, hey, I get to see these people that I love and make stuff. And so there's that, I think. And then I think there's also this feeling of getting to kind of live a new life, like, oh, I get to be like a deer or a superhero, or like, when I watch Spirited Away, I'm just like, yeah, I get to live in the world of Spirited Away for a few hours. So I think there's something there, and I think that it's very instinctual at this point. To me, it's almost like why I love my parents. Like, I don't know, biology, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely very strong.
Sure. To just add another question to that thing, are there any films or filmmakers that has influenced you the most?
Oh man, there's been there's been sort of a steady stream, and you fall in love with certain people and certain aspects of what they do. I think when I was very young, like I said, a lot of the kind of epics, the big sweeping, everybody wants to make these big sort of movies. In college, I was in love with David Lynch, and especially P.T. Anderson. And what I loved about P.T. Anderson was the way he worked with his actors, and he brought the actors on every time with him. I just love that. Oh, and Bergman. There's a behind the scenes of a Bergman movie. I think it was Winter Light, and they can't shoot because there's a weird sound going on, which anyone that makes movies knows what that's like. But there's these famous actors, and the camera's still rolling, and then they're in the scene. They're like, sorry, there's a buzz. And then the famous actors are like, oh, is it maybe up here? Oh, and then they all sort of are wandering around trying to figure out what it is. And it's like, they were just 12 people on some island in Sweden doing this together. They were all buddies. And I was like, wow, that is just the greatest thing I've ever seen. You know what I mean? And how that they were being professional, but also it was just this thing they were all doing together. And I think, God, I love that. So, and I also love his films. And I mean, so many filmmakers. Actually, Chloe Chow, who is a classmate, I edited one of her films in school.
Oh, neat.
She is the writer, especially, like the way she finds movies and builds them, but builds them with a community and with people. When she made Songs My Brothers Taught Me, because I read that script and saw a bunch of cuts, we were talking and she was like, God, that was so difficult. I hope I never make a movie like that again. And I was like, I hope you do. Everyone in the world hopes you do, because it was so amazing. So that, she really inspires me. And Mike Flanagan, he's been a mentor of mine. Watching Absentia, his first film, I didn't know a movie could be so scary and also so heartfelt and so full of soul and humanity. And I think all of his work contained that sort of, they're really good genre pieces, but they also have so much humanity in them, and empathy and sort of pathos, and that I didn't know you could do that until I saw his work. And I think that's opened up the world of genre for me in a way that wasn't there before. Good question.
Yeah. Thank you. Daniel, you like to ask one?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's everything you just said. I love Meg Flanagan. I love that's awesome. And that must have been such a cool experience working with Chloe Zhao and editing one of her movies, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a short film, and we went to grad school together. We all went. I mean, Molly, I went to grad school with too, and she was so great and so talented, and she'd write all these scripts, and they were all better than most of our scripts, and then she'd just shoot one. I mean, it was really great. But the other thing about Chloe that I'll say is that she is the real deal. Like, she went and lived in that reservation for months, and I mean, close to a year, I think. You know, she's really just devoted to what she does. I think that's the thing, that in addition to her tremendous talent and intelligence and it is her just sort of full devotion to the medium and the stories that she tells and the people she tells them about.
Awesome. Now I wanted to, this might be a random one, but I feel like it's related to what you were saying about the fantasy a bit. Now, because I noticed that Wilson is kind of in a fantasy world in ways. And I just noticed the tiny detail with the name on the plants with Gandalf and Katniss. Can you talk about the inspiration behind that, and just if there were any other names you loved on the plants that we didn't really see?
I think Plants-a-Lot was one of the plant names on there. So it's you know, I mean, I think I loved the character of Wilson. I think I was the character of Wilson at a certain point in my life, or had aspects of him. And I think that this, some of the people I knew in my life have, you know, they were very into fantasy, use it to kind of protect themselves from the world in some ways. And it's sort of this wonderful source of joy and sometimes strength and inspiration, and there are these heroes. And I think it also is a way to kind of, it's like a shield from reality to some degree. And so I wanted to have him be this, my girlfriend's a therapist, and she talks about how a lot of people that struggled when they were younger love Harry Potter and use it as a kind of guide for life, the way some people use religion for life. And I think a lot of people find in these fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, like it's sort of almost like a spiritual text or something. And it means a lot. It's more than just like, oh, I love this. Like it means big things to them, and you know, what to do with evil and how to be a person and stuff like that. So, and I feel that too. So I wanted to have him be, you know, very much involved in the sort of living in a fantasy world. And I don't think you ever see it, but he has a sword in the background of one shot, like a wooden sword that I built when I was like 10, that we used in the background. I think actually we cut that shot, which is too bad. But that wallpaper of his, where he clearly just lives in this kind of womb, you know, that I felt that in my life, and I wanted to bring that to his character, and show that is, you know, he hasn't really grown up in some ways, but also like that stuff's so great and awesome that I wanted to celebrate it and, you know, show the sort of aspect of it in his life.
Okay, that's great. I think that's awesome.
I'm glad you picked up on that. I was like, someone's going to see this. Someone's going to see the Gandalf on the plants or whatever. Yeah.
At least one. Now,
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, just this is my kind of like series of questions for the writing. I just wanted to ask with the opening scene, you kind of, I won't spoil anything, but you throw us really into it with just a little bit of the blood. So was that always your opening scene, or were you entertaining other ones? Just the best way to drop us into the story?
I think it was, there was sometimes a little bit of a preamble before that, but it was always the opening scene. And I think the reason behind it was, especially because the first two movies I made were a little bit ethereal, or sort of a little bit in the sort of head and emotion world.
Okay.
That I wanted to make sure that this was a tactile movie that involved physicality right away. And I think throughout the film, we tried to emphasize the physical space, hands on sinks, the sort of the very much the feeling of being these characters in this world, and not just in their head, but also the very sort of physical nature of the reality of the world that they were in. And to show that this wasn't a movie about just people being in their heads the whole time, kind of.
Now, Arpit, did you want to jump in with a couple of yours?
Sure. As far as we are talking about the writing, so one thing is quite evident that your film talks about various subjects in its own way, and the approach that you have used in your writing or in filmmaking is unique in its own way for the revenge story, as far as the revenge story concerned. So how did you come up with that? And also, how long did it took you to compile the whole story? I mean, the writing itself.
So the writing process, I had an old script. This basic story had been in my head for a long time. And it kept changing as I mean, it's weird to say grow up because I was in my like early 30s or whatever, but you get older, you learn new things about life.
Exactly.
And so the story sort of, even as we were editing, I mean, during the editing process, one of our creative team had a baby. You grow as you make things. So I think the film kept sort of growing with us a little bit. And as far as the writing process, I have a relatively straightforward way of working on stuff where you pitch it to a bunch of friends, and then you create a little treatment, and then you sort of pitch that to people. And by pitch, I just mean you chat with people, and if their eyes light up, that's one thing. And if everyone is like, huh, interesting, then you're like, okay. You bounce it off people. Some filmmakers are very like, I'm going to make this little delicate thing by myself, but I like the bounce. We're all trying to figure this out kind of aspect of the early stages, just so you can set yourself up. And then I had the treatment. We bounced that around. I think the other thing about the writing process for me that is a little bit, it's certainly not unique, but drawing from filmmakers like Chloe Chow and a lot of the filmmakers I admire. Andrea Arnold, maybe not. I think she has a little bit more in her head, but the neorealist filmmakers, all the sort of new wave folks that I admire from all the different new waves, the French, the American, the Korean, they build stories based off what's around them a little bit. And, in this case, it was my cast to some degree, my apartment, where I lived, and the people and experiences in my life. So it's not like it was a found film, but it was definitely created from the ground up rather than the top down to some degree. And I think that's what makes it fun is whenever I work on a film, I definitely have things I want to say and a purpose behind it. But I think because it's such an intimate process, and I wrote the script very quickly once I had the story, and then the actors bring so much to it that it sort of becomes, sometimes when people ask me the themes, I'm like, I actually don't know, because it feels it's almost like this dream that I had. And then with the actors, is this collective dream that we all had. And so we're kind of like, what is even some of this about? Why is that there? So that's been sort of weird. But I think the process, to sum it up, I definitely have a sort of way of writing, but it combines what I want to do with what I have in front of me and sort of making something from that.
Okay. I think it was not entirely the same story, but there is this film called Blue Room. It's a crime thriller, we can say that. So your film sort of reminded me of that film, the way it has set the tone. So I love that film, and that was one of the reasons why I loved your film as well.
That was Blue Ruin, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Jeremy. Yeah. I love that film. That first sequence where he can't.
Not many people have seen it, I guess. Not much people I have talked with, but it's an amazing film.
I remember when it came out, that whole section where he's going to be this like vengeful guy, but he can't like figure out how to get the gun. So then he's stuck with like a pocket. I mean, it's just, it keeps going left when you think it's going to go right. And when we were thinking about this film, we thought a lot about how to deal with the violence in the film, because we didn't want to make it feel like awesome violence. We wanted it to feel ugly and sort of, painful, I think, rather than like, and we watched Green Room, and that was one of the way that they use violence in Green Room was striking to me, because it felt so haphazard. And I mean, in times of my life when I've experienced violence or horrible bodily injury, that movie felt the closest to what it feels like, where like it doesn't feel like close up, slow motion. It's like you're on a lot of adrenaline. And so like when I was in a car crash once, it's like everything's kind of just normal. In fact, you're sort of hyper aware of things, and everything feels very mundane all of a sudden. And you're looking down and there's blood and you're like, huh, interesting. And you're kind of dissociated. And the way that they did film, the violence in that and the death in that was so, I mean, it was very scary because of how kind of normal it was. Like it just was kind of happening, and then someone's arm was off, and then it just kept moving on, and it didn't like dwell on it, And I mean, that's a great film too, but I think that we wanted to bring some of that to this film, where it doesn't feel so much like movie violence, but there's a little bit more real world feeling to it. To sort of the pain in that. So I love that reference. Yeah, Blue Ruin is an awesome movie. Everyone should see it.
Thank you.
For sure.
Daniel, like to ask one?
Yeah, sure. I had it's actually kind of a perfect thing with what we just talked about. I had a couple ones about like just a little bit about the revenge. Is it a spoiler to say that it's a revenge film?
No, I don't think so. I think that's in the log line. Excellent, but good. Okay. I'm glad you asked. Yeah.
Okay. So my question was like, this is a pretty unique revenge film. So were there any ones that inspired it? So I think we might have just probably could have talked about a couple with Blue Ruin and Green Room, but were there any ones that influenced this?
I think because it is such a unique, and I think that's a good way to say that, because it does sort of zig when you think it's going to zag a few different times.
Exactly.
I hope. I mean, that's that maybe that's presumptuous of me, but no. I think that I liked that there's a lot of satisfaction in revenge films, and I think we liked part of that, but the sort of, in order to face this antagonist, the characters transform, and I think one of the things that we really cared about in the film is what it takes, like what you gain through that process of becoming hard, the way that Wilson does in the movie, and what you gain from it, and also what you have to lose in the process. And I really admire I think it's called the Revenge Trilogy from, is it Park Chan-wook, the Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. I mean, I had to turn off the first one during the scene where there's oh my god, the little girl calling in the river. I was like, I can't, it's too awful. I had to stop. But Old Boy, I mean, especially when I was younger, I really and the Sympathy for Lady Vengeance too. I think maybe Sympathy for Lady Vengeance was about what you lose, like that, the story of someone, to fight something terrible, you must become terrible, and what can your humanity survive this process of kind of growing up, like and I think that's we all really gravitated towards that aspect of the film.
Okay, fascinating. Now I'd also love to, I love that you mentioned like kind of like that, how he hardens a bit, and it kind of almost feels like a hardened crime film in a way, but also I really got that sense just with how you shoot New York and how you shoot the night scenes, and that it's kind of focusing more on the grimy underbelly of it. So what was that like in cinematography, and also choosing the neighborhoods to highlight New York?
Well, that was just so fun. Because I'd lived in this neighborhood for about 10 years.
Oh, cool.
And so I knew all the places to shoot. And it was just, I went on a city bike and I just spent a few weeks biking around everywhere and taking photographs of all the places that looked like that. And actually now, I mean, I can't send you photos, but all the places that we shot are now sort of fancy high rises, actually.
Oh, really?
Most of them. The one zone under the bridge, we filmed there. That was our second choice because it was raining. And I was like, where can we shoot in the rain? And I was like, oh, under a bridge. That's fine. We won't have to, or under a highway. Then we can be protected from the rain by the highway. But it definitely, we wanted to find places. I was shooting on an A7, which is very difficult to shoot on because you just had this tiny little monitor. But it's really good at low light. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to shoot this movie, is because I love the way New York feels at night and the sort of noir part of it. I just was like, oh man, this is so beautiful and so interesting looking. And so, I mean, it was just so much fun to find these places and to basically use the light that was there. And to discover all these places and to set the movie in these found locations. It was just so fun. And I think I told this story in another interview, but there's also all sorts of weird stuff. Like there was this, people feed cats under the bridge. So there was this like cat village, but all the cats it was abandoned because of all the raccoons that moved in. So it was like a gang of raccoons and a gang of cats, and the raccoons won.
That's a movie.
And the raccoons were fucking scary, intimidating, like Brooklyn raccoons that did not give a fuck that we were there. They were just like, they didn't give a fuck. They were really in our faces the whole time. So, you get a lot of New York stories. Another fun one is we shot from sort of 10 p.m. to kind of 5 a.m. for all the fight scenes, which is why the actors look like they want to die during some of those. It was also so cold because it was winter, and they were, and we'd go into like, at about 10, we'd go to, or I guess at about midnight, we'd go to this wonderful restaurant that was so warm and beautiful and like inviting, and we still have the makeup on, and they'd all be like, and warm ourselves by a literal fireplace that was there and eat delicious food. And we were like, do we have to go back? We have to go back. And then sort of go back out to the, to the street. Because we didn't have a warm, it was just us. There was no car to warm up in, and there was never any switching out. We were all four of us on our feet the whole time. So yeah, but I mean, it was an amazing adventure to do that. I hope I get to do something like this again.
Okay, cool. Makes you love New York. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I've been there for 13 years, and I it's a crazy place, but I do love it.
Yeah, I've never actually been to New York City, so that's definitely on my bucket list.
Sure. So I'll just ask the question where you guys have just left the conversation. One of the things which I loved in your film is the light. The use of the light is amazing in your film. So how did you come up with this idea of the using of the light, and how did you use it to set a tone for your film?
Yeah, my sort of, if I wasn't DP cinematographer and a lot of the short films or thesis films I crewed on, I was the gaffer. I really loved gaffing. ACing felt very nerve-wracking because you're handling like $20,000 lens all the time, and you have to do it really fast and you have people focus. Gaffing is so fun because you just get to throw sandbags around, and you're with your, you have all your, your crew, and if I don't, like, I have to write something down when I shoot where I put like first things first, or it's like directing, acting, shooting, and I have to put lighting like fifth or sixth, because otherwise I just focus on lighting because it's so fun. I'm like a lighting nerd. And then they look like people I said, okay, Perry, you get one light. You get one light and practicals, or else you're just going to noodle with that the whole time and not do other stuff. So with this one, I did the same thing. I was like, you get one light, and then you have to find the rest of it. And so I think what it did was it really made me focus on whatever that one light was, and really try to find locations that had cool lighting already. and to pull a bunch of sort of cinematographer gaffer tricks that have to do with color, that have to do with like color balancing and stuff. We would run around outside at night with a single. We've got this $35 light on Amazon, and put sometimes we put a pillowcase over it, and sometimes we put a paper towel over it to make it a little softer. And I would just occasionally like move that, and the rest of the time we were just finding what was there. So I think that what's cool about finding light is it has mood built in, and it never feels over. And it's okay that faces go to darkness sometimes, and it's okay that you kind of go in and out of places. And it just gets me really excited that sort of combining of neorealism with the supernatural. It's a little weird, but that stuff gets me really excited, and I think that I'm glad. I don't know if I've ever got a question about the lighting, so you can tell I'm geeking out about it. But I love using new colors and mixing them and having like, yeah. If I could just spend the whole movie doing nothing but lighting, that would be fun. I care about story and acting more, but like I said, I'm like it. You know how people are gearheads? I'm like a lighting head. It's easy to geek out on. Yeah.
Yeah, but
love
it
the
definitely
passion.
works out because I think it, kind of very catchy. It helps. It helped me, to definitely see it in a uniquely just because of the light. So yeah, it was bang on for me at least.
Okay, good. I'm glad it had a good effect. Awesome.
Yeah. So also, just while back we were discussing that how much you loved shooting in New York and everything. So I mean, I know it won't be fair to ask, but do you have any specific scene that you loved shoot?
Let's see. I want to do one without any spoilers. I can tell you all it's the one where it's a purple light and he's kind of at the end of his rope, and there's a purple light in the background, and then weird things start happening. That one was just so silly. Really fun to shoot.
I love that scene. I love that scene. That was
Yeah,
cute.
that was a blast. The fight scenes are all fun because we'd never done that before, and I think that we trained with I worked with an MMA fighter, a professional, to like come up with the scenes, and then they worked with a guy that actually worked on the Avengers who was a friend of a friend to help them with the set. So that was fun in a very dorky way because they're my two friends, and they were like, this is so fun, and so that was fun. Without doing any spoilers, there's a scene at the very end of the film that is very emotional, that everyone was very scared of doing because of how intense it was. And all day the actors were very nervous, and I was very nervous because when you're shooting outside, there could be cars going by, there could be crazy people on the street, and by crazy I mean like Brooklyn hipsters, like being annoying, being like, what are you shooting, this kind of stuff. So you never, especially with an emotional scene, it's a little, you're a little worried about shooting on the street. But we just got there and we did the first take, and it was amazing, and it started to kind of snow a little bit, and all of us just fell into kind of almost I don't use the word spiritual lightly because it's a little woo woo, but I think we all felt this kind of peace and like sort of like hypnosis, and we're like, oh man, this is just, it doesn't even matter if it's good or not, but we feel so happy that we're making this. And it was just like, wow, what an amazing, we're so grateful we get to do this. We're so happy we get to do this. Like, oh man, so I think that was probably my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll ask the one question, then I'll shift to Daniel.
Sure.
Is that okay, Daniel?
Oh yeah, no worries.
So yeah, we have talked about your film, and now I'm just gonna put you a little away from your film again. Yeah. So most of your film till now, which I have seen, is either is horror and thriller together, or the horror.
Yeah.
And is it fair to say that it's your favorite genre? That's the first question. And second question is that, are you just want to continue making this genre film, or you have a plan to make other sort of films as well?
Excellent question. So I do, it's funny, in school my my big film in graduate school was a musical. I don't think anyone in the world would have guessed that.
Cool.
And before that, I had made a lot of sort of psychological films. One psychological horror, one kind of, you know, I think what I love, the thing that I love the most is bringing like interior lives of characters to the outside in some way. And I think a lot of genre can do that. Musicals can do that. Sci-fi can do that. Other kind of fantasy can do that. So I sold a show about 1.5 years ago, and that was horror. And I'm working on another horror show and a horror movie right now. But I have a
Is that the
sci-fi
one
script.
with Amazon, if I'm not wrong? You're writing it, maybe? Or the one for
Oh,
the
no,
Amazon?
No, that
Yeah.
was that's one called Bingo Hell, which is hilarious that I worked on that because it's so different. But it's with this director Gigi and a writer called Shane, and I was brought into the film later because I loved. It's just about a group of elderly folk and this evil asshole gentrifier coming in and fucking with their shit, and then like getting the old gang back together to fight this guy. And I was like, I just love this story so much, like about everybody banding together to fight evil. So, I think I'm just a lover of genre and of all kinds. But horror does the thing that I mean, I don't want to get too academic here, but I do think that horror does tap into the psychological in a way that few genres can. And I really like that part of it. I like the psychological part. I like the catharsis of it. I like the feeling of people's fears and dreams and hopes and stuff in their life being manifested in monsters and ghosts and demons and all this stuff. So I that aspect of it I really like. And I think I'll keep, like, I have I joke, every nerd has like the fantasy thing that they want to make, obviously. So I have that, but there are some. It's still a world that has some real scary stuff in it. So it's always, I think that like, that aspect of it, I think will always be woven in there to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
you like to ask me?
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. Just for me, like I think that's why I love horror so much, just because there's so much good to do with it. I mean, because like I watched a film at Fantasia the other day, like Last Thing Mary Saw, that feels at its core like a drama, but it's like it's a horror because it has like the horror elements, and it's just like take away those horror elements and it's still a great drama. And I think with your film too, take away the horror elements, it's still a great story about these two siblings, which I think is so neat.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. That like watching Mike's work and also Let the Right One In, which I couldn't think about anything else other than that film, the original when I first saw it, because it was a beautiful coming of age story and a scary movie, and they both made each other better. Like they combined to be something greater than the sum of their parts. And
For sure.
yes, and so you mentioned Buffy, right? Buffy. When I was younger, I love that they took, like stuff in your life, like, oh, my parents are getting divorced, and they turned that into like a scary time jump situation, or oh, my boyfriend's jealous, and they turned him into a monster. And it's like you take stuff from real relatable stuff from the lives of teenagers and you turn that into something wacky and supernatural and fun. And that's stuff I just love it.
For sure. And I just had I would be remiss if I didn't mention the cast. So I'd love to ask, like, what was it like getting, because I know you had worked with McLeod and Evan. What was it like reuniting with, or just working with them again on this project and having them as producers as well, and Libby too?
They're really good friends of mine. The story, what happened with They Look Like People is we got drunk and we were behind some bar near for some reason a dumpster. That's what I remember. And we were just like, we gotta make movies. And so we made a deal where I would buy them plane tickets to New York. And we bought the plane tickets, and I didn't have a script, but I was like, we are making a movie in February next year. I think this was in like September, October. And then we bought the plane tickets, and then I just was like writing scripts the whole time. And I actually ditched the script that I wrote and to write a new one. And then they showed up and we made it. But the whole journey of feature filmmaking, it's really started with those two guys. Margaret was also a really good friend of mine, and we brought her into the first two films. And so it really feels like family at this point. They feel like my brothers, and Libby was new this time, but she feels like part of the family now. She was just unbelievable, both as a collaborator and someone that just showed up ready to do was really just down with our mode of filmmaking, but also just she brought things to that character that I didn't even know were there. What an amazing performance. So it feels like cheating in some ways, because they're my really good friends and I love working with them, but they also are amazing actors that make anything I write better. So it's like I get the best of both worlds. It's so great to work with them. And I can't wait to, we all have different projects and like I said, TV shows and things, but I anticipate us working together in some way for a very long time. And it's so great to bring new people in. We also, in addition to Libby, I had never had a film scored before. In the second one, we brought in Kitka, but they were already finished pieces. And so Mitch Bain, that worked with McLeod on A Ghost Waits, came in and just killed it. Like it sort of later on, and it's so wonderful to have your family and keep bringing in more people to the family, basically.
That's awesome. I'm glad you mentioned A Ghost Waits, because I actually chatted with McLeod about that and the director Adam Stovall. I think last October now, which seems kind of crazy, but so yeah, McLeod is a very, very nice guy. So, and
he's a great guy.
And I thought it seemed very fun for him to play this character and have the different elements to the character, I suppose.
He plays a kind of not a very nice character, and he is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. So it was sort of fun to watch him wrestle with that.
Because he felt like he was in his comfort zone on that drunken night, right?
yeah.
Cool. So Arpit, I'll let you jump in with your, I guess, last two, and then I have like a fun one.
Awesome. Sure. I'll have this question, So are you, as a director, are you like just a script man that you like to stick to the script, or there is a room for improvisation for the actors? You allow them to do that?
I definitely enjoy improv. I think that I have it's really fun. I remember looking at Judd Apatow and stuff, and he sets up 5 cameras and then he just lets them go for hours and hours. And I like his methods, because it's a lot of improv, but also it's not letting the story go away from you. So, we usually, what we do is we have the script, we rehearse the script, we shoot the script a few times, and then there's sort of built-in sections for improv where we'd be like, okay, this could be a really fun section to improv off of. And sometimes whole scenes are improv. So and They Look Like People, when Evan met Margaret, the two actors, there's a scene in They Look Like People where the character, she does judo on him, and that whole thing is improv. And I thought this would be a really fun. I didn't know how good it would be, but it ended up being awesome. And she like flips him on his back. He was very surprised in real life and in the movie. So for example, in this one, like when they're playing cards on the, playing cards outside the thing, we did that scene straight, and then we did a few where they did just messing around. And I like Mike Flanagan does a thing where at the end when he's happy, he tells his actors, okay, now you go, like do as many takes as you want after he's got what he wants, and lets the actors just kind of go. And there's a lot of, because I was on the set of Dr. Sleep, there's a lot of trust that everybody places in everybody, so that the actors are not like, okay, let me do 20 more takes. But I do think that the actors deserve to give it, the actors are the movie. That's what you're looking at. So that they deserve to do, have their shot and have some fun while shooting. Yeah. And I love that stuff. Sometimes you get some unbelievable stuff that way too. When McLeod is walking away, McLeod and Evan are walking away after their first interaction, and he's just like shouting things at him. All of that is improvised.
Okay.
McLeod is improvising all that. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So my last question to you will be, what success means to you as an individual, and what success means to you as a filmmaker?
Success means to me as a what?
What success means to you as an individual, and what success means to you as a filmmaker?
Oh man, that is a very psychologically complicated question for someone in the arts who's trying to make a living. Uh, you know, it is yeah, it's very complicated. I think that, you know, there's I will say that I think the thing that I care the most about is, you know, when you make stuff, I care a lot about, I don't know if this is quite answering your question, but I think it's what I think about when I get a little bit lost, because I think it is complicated, because you want to be an artist, whatever that means, and make stuff that you care about. You know, you also like have to rent a house and, you know, like start a family and do a bunch of other things. So there's always a little bit of a wrestling match there. I think that I care a lot about, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but what I'm kind of putting in the cultural groundwater. You know, and so a lot of when I make films that's something I think a lot about. And so to me, maybe success, whether or not the film succeeds or not, is you know, are we proud of it as a team, and does it speak to a group of people that, you know, we made it for. I remember when They Look Like People, we were at a screening, and I was actually feeling sorry for myself because none of the other cast and crew were there. And it was in Harvard Yard, and it was like a weird vibe. I don't know. And I went to the screening, and afterwards, when I was talking to people, there was a young man whose brother went to war and came back with a lot of PTSD. And he watched They Look Like People, and he was like sobbing, and he was like, I don't even know what I'm saying, but like, I love this and it meant so much and it's so hard. And then I started crying and I didn't know why. And, you know, and then we just sort of had a moment, and all the other people were like waiting to talk to me. Were like, awkward, you know? But that zone to me feels sort of like a success, I would say.
Yeah. Sure. You like to ask the last one?
Sure. Yeah. No, yeah, just that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Just the emotional connection. That's really neat. And I like to think of weird questions when I can. And I just I don't know if it's going to be super weird, but you had mentioned earlier that you film in your apartment. And I just, and during one scene I was like, okay, that what they're doing is weird. So I was just kind of curious if you had any weird apartments to your stories. What's the weirdest thing you've done in your apartment, or are there any crazy stories that happen
oh my gosh,
in apartment living?
This is great, and there's so many great ones now. I mean, so that was his apartment was my room in my apartment. Okay. Which meant that I was like, we had to move my mattress out, and I was sleeping on like on the floor and a sleeping bag during the shoot, because we had to move my entire life out of that room and shove it in like a hallway where we had to sort of squeeze by, which everyone hated. Okay. So, but the worst thing was, I don't think there's a spoiler. There's a symbol drawn on the wall at one point in the movie that is an evil symbol. And we did it in chalk, and it would not come off. And so I was left with this terrifying mark that looked kind of like a ghost that was on the wall for probably 6 months. And when people would come into my apartment, they'd be like, what the fuck is that? And I'd be like, it's part of a movie. And then one of my friends came in and was like, we have to sage this. And she like saged it all because she was scared that there was like evil demons like still in the apartment. And that was like right above my bed. So that, you know, we should have just painted right after. I don't know. I figure it's like one day I'll find something that can wipe this off. So I'll just like wait until I find the right thing. But then I just repainted, which I should have done right away. So I think that was a good story. Good. Yeah. Shooting in your own apartment, mixed feelings about it. You know, yeah.
Just no creepy symbols if you do shoot in your apartment again.
Yeah, or like make sure you use something that'll wipe off. Yeah.
Okay, so it's technically still there, even though you painted over it, right?
It's true. It is still there under the paint. You're right. That is terrible to think about.
You just have to pretend like, okay, I reject this negative energy.
Right, right. You just have to sage every day or whatever people do, you know. Yeah.
Hey, that's pretty much where our conversation ended. So we just wanted to thank Perry again for coming on to chat about When I Consume You, which is playing next on Monday, October 18th, as part of the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival in person. Thanks for watching the interview, and thank you, Arpit, for co-hosting.